Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about A Country Hero from 1917. And this continues my series where I try to review the entire filmography of Buster Keaton, and this is a different kind of video because I have not actually seen this film. I can't see this film because it is lost. It has been lost for a very long time. It's the only film of this Fatty Arbuckle run with Buster Keaton that's missing, and it's also the only entire film of Buster Keaton's that is missing. There are other segments and such that are missing, but this is the only entire film that has been lost, and it's been lost for quite a while. In fact, there might not actually be anyone living who has seen it. Maybe there might be, but probably not. And it's kind of sad that it is lost, not only because we don't have the entire filmography of Buster Keaton. For a silent film star to only have one film missing, I think is actually a pretty good track record. This is actually an important film in the history of this series of comedic shorts with Buster Keaton, Fatty Arbuckle, and Al St. John's, the comic film company. And this is their first film moving from New York to California. And the California films have a much different vibe than the New York film, certainly. And it's kind of interesting that the first one is the one that's actually missing. Now, Fatty Arbuckle had worked in California before. He moved to New York to do this, and then he moved back. It's interesting to think about what this film could have been. Now, this is more of a Western, which is quite like the next film in the series, which would be Out West. And you can kind of guess from that, since this takes place in kind of more of a Western town called Jazzville, that it's probably like Out West and has more of a Western thing, although that is like more of a parody of Westerns. This seems to be more of the kind of plot structure we've seen from other Fatty Arbuckle films where he's competing with someone else for a girl and then a third party gets involved as well. But you can kind of imagine shot-wise is probably similar to Out West. I often kind of wonder if they use some of the sets for this in Out West. I'd imagine they might. I don't know. I mean, they were making a ton of money off of these at the time, theoretically, so maybe they would have built two elaborate sets for Fatty Arbuckle. There's nothing that suggests either or, but it's something to think about. Apparently, Jazzville was made to be an exact replica of Fatty Arbuckle's hometown, Smith Center, Kansas. So maybe they repurposed it or something. You're going to hear me guessing a lot in this video because I don't know, and no one really does know. We go off of these old newspaper clippings that we found. We go off of various books and research material from what we've seen before. But when you're going into a lost film, there's a lot of guessing and suggesting. And if this film is ever found and you watch this video after actually having seen this film, which I hope actually happens one day, I'm sure you'll be able to point out all my problems with it having actually seen it, but you know, I didn't actually see it. So, now the other interesting thing about this is actually the film debut of Joe Keaton, which was Buster Keaton's father. He actually plays a major role in this. It's kind of more of a Fatty Arbuckle, Al St. John, Joe Keaton movie, if anything. The plot of this film is Roscoe Arbuckle plays a blacksmith in a blacksmith's shop, and Joe Keaton owns a garage in the town of Jazzville, and they are romantic rivals for a school teacher played by Alice Lake. They're, competing with one another until the city dude played by Al St. John comes to town, and Roscoe Fatty Arbuckle has to fix his car as him and Joe Keaton have to band together to stop the city dude from winning over the school teacher. And they even go to a village ball where there's a talent competition and Buster Keaton performs. And it's interesting that Joe Keaton has so much of a role. One of my main resources for this was a Silentology blog post where they bring up, and it's really true, that none of the press materials for this film featured Joe Keaton. It prominently features his son Buster Keaton a lot more. And the other funny thing about that is, like, Buster Keaton's not like in this movie a lot. Like, he has probably one of the standout sequences apparently, which is the Fatma snake dance, and he would use this dance in other things, particularly performing for the troops in World War I. He used it a little bit in The Cook, and he'd show off his dancing ability, but I don't think anything quite like what supposedly happened in this movie. Watching The Cook, like, he's skilled in that, but it's not the Fatma dance, certainly. And supposedly he gets out like a woman's stocking and pretends it's like a snake and stuff like that. Sounds actually really funny. But supposedly, I guess at one point they go to the village ball and there's like a vaudeville type competition. Who brought the school teacher to the ball, or whether this was just like a weird sequence within the film, as these films aren't exactly the most well plotted out and figured out and things. That's possible too. We do know that Roscoe Fatty Arbuckle was hit with breakaway furniture that's supposed to break when it hits him, and there was an accident with that and he was actually hurt. We know that Natalie Talmadge, would be Buster Keaton's future wife, supposedly shot something for this, but we're not sure if what she shot was actually in the short. So she was there because we know Alice Lake clearly was more of the female lead. She was just there, but we don't know what Natalie Talmadge did, which doesn't seem to be a major role, or even if it made it in there and they just shot it. And this was actually released on December 10th, 1917, and if you look on one of the posters, it suggests that you should watch this, around Christmas time. I guess this was sort of a big Christmas release. I don't think it was exactly very Christmassy. One of the things that people suggest, and I've noticed it comes up a lot with this film, is that probably because Fatty Arbuckle played a blacksmith, that this would go on to influence the Buster Keaton film, The Blacksmith. A lot of people have suggested where Buster Keaton is making his eggs on the hot iron that you do your blacksmith stuff on, that Fatty Arbuckle probably did that gag as well. Because in silent film comedies, oftentimes they would keep reusing and reusing the same gags, and they were fine with that because most people didn't have VCRs and couldn't watch these things too close together, so they probably didn't notice, but that was kind of par for the stylistic artistic choice, I guess, at the time as well. It wouldn't be unusual if, when Fatty Arbuckle played a blacksmith in this film, if that ended up being an influence on Keaton's film, The Blacksmith. I don't think this film has that much influence, having seen The Blacksmith. From what I've read about this film, there might be select gags that are, because apparently there are parts in this where Fatty Arbuckle's working on the city dude Al St. John's car, which does happen in The Blacksmith, so maybe they do something similar, or Buster Keaton knew after watching that film be made what worked and what didn't. Other things, I guess we know that there is like a big car chase scene that Al St. John tries to take Alice to the city. One or more cars are demolished by a train, and that probably it worked out for Fatty Arbuckle's character at the blacksmith in the end. This is an important piece of Buster Keaton's filmography. I don't think it is like insanely important. It's interesting that it was just like this first film in that move. It might have ended up being sort of a transition film, which I thought probably not, because it seemed like Fatty Arbuckle sort of knew what he was doing and knew how to film in California. The New York films certainly have more of an intimate, kind of grimier, kind of cooped up feel, more so than the California films, which have much more space and much more expansive and use those landscapes to their advantage in a very beautiful way. And it would have been interesting to see From Coney Island to A Country Hero and see that transition. Now we're seeing From Coney Island to Out West, which is still, pretty dramatic in terms of that. Having had the DVD set of Arbuckle and Keaton for a while now, I kind of noticed while rewatching these that when I originally watched them, I would not be as into the New York films as I was into the kind of California films, and not on purpose. I wasn't like, where are the California films of this series? I would always remember like really getting into it when I got to Out West, or even when I'd rewatch it, I'd start with Out West. And thinking of the space they had in California works probably better for the gag. So I think a lot of this stuff sounds like really cool and really funny. It's interesting that Buster Keaton would like take a backseat to his father, but if you've read his book and heard interviews, anytime he talks about his father, he talks about him with great respect. Or maybe Fatty Arbuckle knew because Joe Keaton was sort of a vaudevillian legend that maybe that would get more people into the film. I don't think that's true, although there is a newspaper clipping that brings up that Joe Keaton is working on this film, so maybe he was a bigger star, big enough of a star that they thought, hey, let's put him in this, see what happens, or something like that. It's kind of interesting to have a Fatty Arbuckle Joe Keaton film, really, but then still the standout is Buster Keaton's Fatima Dance, which seems to come up a lot. I hope one day this film is found, and if it happens within my lifetime, I would love to review it. But as of right now, this is all we know of this film, and the more I've read about it, the more I'm curious about what it was like. And I think most people are, and Buster Keaton fans and silent film fans, and a lot of silent films are regrettably and sadly lost. I'm happy that I'm able to review a lot of films that are 100 years old at this point, and that most of them have survived and been able to live on these past 100 years. So I hope that maybe this film will be given that right as well at some point. Maybe someone will find it in a basement somewhere. If you ever see a film reel labeled A Country Hero, just run to a film preservationist, because those are easy to find as fast as you can, and hope that it is that, and that maybe you can share it with the world, because I think everyone would be extremely excited to see the one Buster Keaton film that almost probably no one who's alive right now who's into Buster Keaton has seen. I'll always wonder what this would be like, or how amazing the Fatima Dance was in this, or or whether the Silentology thing says whether this was a turning point with Buster Keaton for audiences or something like that. It does feel like sort of when he gets in the California stuff, he gets a little more confident. Did this spur that on in his performing on film? Not that he wasn't confident before, but it feels like he has almost more confidence in the California films. Did that bring it out? I don't know if we'll ever know, but it's interesting to think about and think about what we could have seen had we ever gotten to see A Country Hero. I have links below in the Silentology blog post about this, also from a book selection from this about Arbuckle and Keaton. I also want to thank Yair Sloan for helping me out with some of the research, and especially want to thank Matt Berry for talking with me and helping me research this lost film as well. And you should also check out Matt Berry's YouTube channel, which is also really cool and has a lot of classic film stuff as well. So if you would like to talk about A Country Hero and what you may know about this film, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to.